Ladies and gentlemen, this is Adam Fishman. I'm the Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and we are very excited to have with us a man who's got an incredible past of service to the state of Israel. And I'm going to let our board member, Steve Goldberg in California, give an official introduction. And that is member of Knesset, a good friend, as long as I've been part of American Friends of Likud, member of Knesset, Yuli Edestein. I'm going to turn it straight over to Steve to introduce you, Yuli, and then we'll get to your briefing and get to the Q&A with what's going on in the world today. I am looking forward to hearing your analysis and insights. Steve?
We're incredibly lucky today to have Yuli Edestein with us. Yuli is a counterexample and demonstrates why the people who say that the phrase ethical politician is an oxymoron, he's an example of why that's false. I think there is nobody who surpasses him in terms of physical and political courage, integrity, principles, and clear thinking. His history is he was born in Ukraine, I believe. He was a refusenik and a prisoner of Zion, and in Siberia beginning in 1984, I think was finally released and made Aliyah to Israel in 1987. We were fortunate to get him, the Jewish people fortunate to have him go into the political arena. He's been in the Knesset. He's had several ministries. He was Speaker of the Knesset, and most recently health minister to help lead Israel out of the COVID crisis. So with that, I turn it over to Yuli.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Adam, for organizing this meeting, and thank everyone for joining. I'll try to be brief in my introductory remarks so that we will be able to get to questions and answers. You'll be able to ask about things that are of real interest to you. I will say that I sincerely hope, as an immediate past health minister of this country, I sincerely hope that soon we'll be able to meet more physically here in Israel and not just via Zoom, but it's still not clear whether Corona has decided to leave us. So, it's still here in Israel. On one hand, we got out of this Omicron wave. On the other hand, in the recent week, we once again hear about the infamous R number going up. And I sincerely hope that once upon a time, we'll be able to say, okay, it happened. It was a terrible experience, but it's behind us. Right now, I wouldn't dare to say that loud and clear. On the political front, as you all know, we are in a very peculiar situation. On one hand, Likud is the strongest, by far the strongest faction in the Knesset, nearly 2 times the size of the second largest party of Yesh Atid. But we are in the opposition. Usually doesn't happen. Usually in Israel, the largest party forms the next coalition and government. Here, for a number of reasons, we see a government of 8 different small factions with the lack of common denominator. I think that even the greatest optimists and supporters of this government wouldn't be able to find any common denominator between parties like Naftali Bennett's party, Yamina, look at the name, Yamina, right, and the Islamic movement on merits. So I think that this is an experiment that is not really working. We see it in practically every field with all the scandals going on inside the coalition. Right now, as we speak, this morning there was a dramatic announcement of the finance minister about reducing the custom taxes on fruit and vegetables, with the immediate harsh reaction of some other partners in the coalition, the ones who are concerned about the future of agriculture. So there's a huge fight going on, but practically no one predicts that in the end of this fight, the coalition will fall. The glue is so strong, and the motivation to stick to this coalition is so strong that unfortunately As I've said, we are in the meanwhile stuck in the opposition. The Knesset finished its winter session last week. So during the next 2 months, there is no practical opportunity to topple the government. This is the sad but realistic analysis. I, as you might know, announced that I demand the primary inside the Likud, primary elections inside the Likud for the leadership of the party, because I, for one, do believe that the moment the change of leadership in the Likud, it will be possible to form the coalition even without going to new elections, to say nothing about after the elections. And I hope that the primary elections will happen somewhere in the end of this year. There is a reason to believe that, because Likud is facing internal elections for the new central committee and for new local branches, leadership of local branches. So I hope that we'll be smart enough to add to that the elections of the new leadership. And after doing that, it will be, I think, just a matter of time, a short time, when we'll be able to get rid of this government that is, as I've said, practically causing a lot of damage in every field. Now, if we look at different issues, I think that there is one lesson we can learn in the next 3 weeks, in the last, 3 weeks. And I even don't think that I'm saying anything controversial. After what happened with this invasion to Ukraine and with the reaction of the world to it, we can say loud and clear that when push comes to shove, and if, God forbid, Israel will be facing an invasion of that kind, there will be a lot of nice speeches. There will be probably some supply of weapons, but no one is going to come to our rescue. What we have is Tzahal, the IDF. What we have is our Mossad, our security forces, our wonderful citizens. But that's more or less what we have in the future conflicts that Israel, God forbid, will be facing. Which brings me obviously to the issue of Iran. And I think it's mind-boggling to see how the same powers that are right now putting serious sanctions on Russia and calling up on the whole world to boycott Russia in every field are sitting with the same Russian representatives, or as the representatives of the present Russian government in Vienna, to discuss what else could be given to Iran to make it easier, basically, for the Iranians, A, to get to nuclear weapons at that stage, B, to continue or to even improve their possibility to continue the support of all the possible terrorist organizations in our area and worldwide. We will be, if an agreement like that really in the end is signed, we will be witnessing how millions and millions of dollars, of new dollars, will get to the hands of Hezbollah and Hamas and all the other nice fellows in our area. And it will definitely be a clear message that countries like Iran are able to reach what they want, because the world practically is, as I've said, not prepared to react in any serious way to all these developments. It's something that also, unfortunately, had to be taken into consideration by the Israeli government, but unfortunately, the present government is silent as far as the Iranian deal is concerned, except for a tweet here, a tweet there. I haven't seen serious pressure, serious statements coming from the prime minister, the foreign minister, as far as the deal with Iran that is defined by everyone as a weaker one, a shorter one, or problematic one is concerned. And let's not forget that we are not talking about the previous deal with high appreciation. It had enough holes itself, but right now it's getting even worse. So is just another reason for us as Israelis and as the Likud to think that we don't have the whole time just to sit on our hands and wait till this coalition and this government decide to go home. There are real issues on the agenda that have to be taken care of. I definitely won't forget the immediate and present dangers that we are facing here from Hamas and Hezbollah, but thank God, of late we are lucky to have, as I've already mentioned, our security forces that managed to keep them quiet. Hezbollah with its project of missiles that was their great hope in Lebanon. They were absolutely sure, and they made statements about it, that in a very short period of time, they will be able to have missiles that will have the potential of hitting every point, basically, in Israel. But right now, they are stuck with this project, thanks to all kinds of efforts that Israel has been making in the recent years. And Hamas, after our reaction to their previous wave of violence, I think is also sitting pretty quiet. It doesn't mean that they are they've become good fellows and they forgot about their original plans of the destruction of Israel, but at least they understand the balance of power right now. And I hope it stays this way, especially with taking into consideration the fact that they were dreaming about covering Israel with missiles from their territory, but thank God the Iron Dome, Kippat Barzel, is not allowing them to do that. And with their tunnels project, we now have the underground obstacle there next to the Gaza Strip, and it makes it much more difficult, nearly impossible for Hamas to really implement their threats as far as their terror attacks inside Israel are concerned. So this is on the security front. Definitely, I'm sure there will be more questions about it. I'll just address it in one sentence. There is this terrible war going on in Ukraine. We're all really worried about the fate of Jewish communities there, about every citizen. We're talking about thousands of citizens dead there in all these bombings and attacks. But the Jewish community is what we are witnessing is really terrible. Some of them have been evacuated. Some are still there. Women and children mostly are trying to escape from this battlefield that Ukraine has become. And we already see several thousands of them taking it into Israel. And here, I don't like the circumstances, but I do like the result, meaning that I sincerely hope that there will be more Jews coming to stay here. God forbid, none of us was looking for this opportunity. But if these terrible developments are happening already, I think that this is raison d'etre of the Jewish state days, and this is a huge difference. What also has to be mentioned, and it's something that people let's talk about, because we all are concentrated on what's going on in Ukraine. But there is also an influx of Olim, of Jewish immigrants from Russia these days, because the younger population, the successful population, business people, high-tech, entrepreneurs, understand the message. They understand that because of the sanctions, because of the situation, there is no future for them in the foreseeable future. There is no future for them in Russia. So we see more and more people here in Israel, as I said, entrepreneurs, educated people who come. And I really hope, once again, here, at least someone is not on mute, and it's terribly difficult to speak. If we could have people on mute, that would be helpful. Thank you. So what I'm saying is that once again, I don't like the circumstances, but the result is that we see new immigrants here, Olim, that come here looking for opportunities here, come with their families, and it's also an encouraging sign for us, for our future here in Israel. We could go into economic issues and all the other things, but I will, as we usually do, I will stop right here in order to enable you to ask questions, and I think it will make it much more interesting.
Yuli, I'll start with this. We're all aware and grateful for and proud of Israel's humanitarian response for what's happening in Ukraine. But the world has taken sides, and there has been criticism of what appears to be a pusillanimous, wishy-washy response by the Israeli government, refusing to take sides. Our president, Jerry Platt, mentions the mayor of Jerusalem put up flags of both Russia and Ukraine on the walls of the old city, for example. And there seems to be a fear of antagonizing the Russian government because of what's happening in Syria. What do you think of the Israeli government's response as far as taking sides in this dispute?
Oh, Steve, you're raising a very sad issue here, because I think there was pardon me for being so blunt, but there was a pathetic attempt to play good cop, bad cop with Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, or what do you call him, alternate Prime Minister Yair Lapid, making statements condemning Russia, and Bennett trying to keep the quote unquote neutral position, and it obviously doesn't work. So let me say this. As far as criticism is concerned, that I've heard criticism coming from, I don't know, William Cohen and other people that openly criticize the Israeli position, I can't accept this criticism. Everyone who wants to criticize, please first will have to explain to me why the heck are the others sitting with the Russians on the same side of the table in Vienna. So if you want to boycott, boycott. If you have to shoot, don't talk. So if you want to boycott, then make it a real boycott, and don't let the Russians to control the deal with Iran in order to enable, as I've said, the Iranians to get to nuclear weapons. But this is about criticism. About our position, I think I spoke at Menachem Begin Center a couple of days ago, and on a conference on Israeli security, a very nice forum. And I said there, and I'm saying that to you, I think that if we want to see the legacy of Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin, as far as our party, our movement, the Likud is concerned, I think that we should never lose our moral compass. It can't all the time be just about tactical interests and this or that immediate threat. We have to always remember that once again, the existence of our country and the strength of our country also depends on our values. And this is something to consider. This is something to take into consideration. And when people say to me, what basically I said to you a couple of minutes ago, yeah, but when push comes to shove here in our area, and when it will be about Israel, do you also expect every country to come to our rescue or to take a strong position? Yeah, I know they were. The question is whether I want to supply them with all kinds of reasons, or what we call in Hebrew terutzim. I don't want them to say in a couple of years from now, yeah, the way you took a moral stand on that conflict, you can demand from us the moral stand on, say, Iran-Israel or Hamas-Israel or whatever the case might be.
Just as a follow-up to that question, if I could, with respect to what Stephen mentioned about the agreement that we currently have with the Russians with respect to Syria, if we were to stand up and take a side, and that would be affected, how would you respond to that?
It could be affected, but the question is once again, what are the consequences? Well, this is the wrong word. What are the conclusions, rather, or what's going on right now? Right now, what we see is that Syria, joined by North Korea and Venezuela, I think, and Iran, are the only countries that took a position on the Russian side. You know, they openly support Russia in this conflict. I think that even if we try to be wishy-washy on that, I think that Syrians will still be closer to Russia. So we are now coordinating our efforts with the Russians there. It's part of their interest. Don't forget that there are lots of interests in Syria, and one of the interests is that Iranians don't control Syria too tightly, too closely. So I would say that you know, when we'll need an additional round of coordination, we'll coordinate. But right now, I think that we might, as I've said, lose a lot by taking this wishy-washy position.
With regard to the Iran deal, it looks like it was about to be signed, this terrible, weaker deal, but maybe the Russians have thrown a monkey wrench into it. Assuming it is signed, are you aware of any government plan inside Israel to deal with this afterwards? Does it make self-defense, preemptive military action impossible? Because if Israel were to make that decision, there would be worldwide sanctions and condemnation. Should the Israeli government be speaking out more forcefully against this agreement now, rather than this behind the scenes that doesn't seem to have worked? What's your thoughts about what happens when this decision comes out that the deal has been signed?
Well, I definitely can't tell you, Steve, what the government's actions would be, because, as I've said, in the meanwhile, they keep silent and they're not taking any serious stand on the issue. As far as the opportunities and possibilities are concerned, well, nothing is impossible. And Israel proved it a couple of times in its history. Menachem Begin proved it a little bit more than 40 years ago. And I think that nothing is impossible. For us, definitely, we will have to be prepared for every development and to once again realize that, you know, there may be ups and downs, but the world community is not treating the Iranian danger seriously. And this is something to be taken into consideration. The rest definitely is not for a discussion on Zoom, but I think that it's very difficult. Iran is no Iraq 40 years ago, and Iran is no Syria. Iran is a regional superpower. We all understand that. Having said that, you know, if we analyze the issue and if we come to the conclusion that it's up to us, I think that solutions could be found.
If I can ask you a question from one of our members, Stephen Orlow, and also follow that up with a question from our president, Jerry Platt. Doesn't the fact that, talking about Bennett as going to Moscow and trying to be the mediator, doesn't the fact that he's acting or attempting to act as the mediator advance the strength of the argument for Israel not alienating Russia? And the follow-up question from Jerry is, considering well, first of all, do you think that's the right way to go, and we should be involved in that type of mediation? And secondly, considering your intimate knowledge of the intricacies of the conflict, if you think that there is a place for Israel to play in terms of mediation, would you not be the better choice as the go-between?
Okay. first of all, as some people here have known me for the last, 20, if not more years, I didn't want to sound like like a standard opposition MK that spends an hour with you criticizing everything the government is doing, and without without any serious discussion or serious conversation about all the issues. That's why I even didn't go into all the mistakes of the government in this conflict, even before it developed. Just the couple of days before the conflict, Israeli ambassador in Kyiv was called to the foreign ministry for to get the red carpet reception in the negative sense of the word there, because of some statements that some genius in our foreign ministry made, that they turned to Russia to help evacuate Jews from the Ukraine in case of a conflict. So the Ukrainians were mad at us. And practically on the same day, the Russians were mad at us about some other statement or whatever about Ukraine. So there were like numerous mistakes. One of them, Adam, I'll say it loud and clear, was to poke our nose into this whole thing with the nisyonot, with the attempts to coordinate between Russia and Ukraine. I don't have any other word. It was pathetic. It was really pathetic. And I'm saying that with a lot of confidence, because I do have to say that, thank you for the compliment to whoever asked it, Jerry or Orlov, or whoever asked it. When I was still Speaker of the House, and when there was the previous round of conflict with Crimea and Donbass and all this stuff, there were people, serious people, including some foreign politicians. They asked me whether I don't think that with my roots, just to remind you, as Steve mentioned, I was born in Ukraine, but I lived my whole life in Russia. I had a very high profile visit to Russia not so long ago, including the speech before the parliament there, and something that not a single Israeli leader ever did, and was never invited actually to do that. So someone was definitely great context in the Ukrainian administration. So people said to me, probably you could try to do something. And I thought about it, and I said to them, if I would think that there is 1% of success or the possibility of success, I would leave everything right now and go and try to do something, if not for the peace of the world, and at least for the sake of the Jewish communities in both countries and the situation they were there. But I understand there is even not 1% chance of success in that. So I don't understand why we had to play this game, and the attempts. And this is something that also Jerry also mentioned. The attempts right now to say we can't, send humanitarian help to the Ukrainians because we are the mediators in this conflict. These are once again pathetic attempts, and it's really something that okay. I even don't want to continue commenting on that.
Steve?
With regard to relations with the United States now, I want to switch to something that still seems very important. What are you aware of the relations are now, both with regard to the Iran deal and with regard to the Palestinian issue, Jerusalem, Shimon HaTzadik? Where do things stand between Israel and the United States?
Well, I don't think that there is any, crisis in the relations or something of the kind, but it's not, I think it's not such an exaggeration to say that there is no real influence of the present Israeli government in Washington, D.C. And yes, there are good relations. Biden is not new to the business. Biden visited Israel many times. He's well connected, experienced everything, and people around him know Israel, know Israelis. So it's not that, as I've said, there is a crisis, and even I would dare to say that it's not the kind of relations we unfortunately had, what is it, 13 years ago, something like that, with the then Israeli prime minister being, basically shown into the White House through some garage or underground parking or something like that. So we are not there, but on the other hand, I think that there were several mistakes as far as the Israeli part is concerned. The statement that there will be no surprises as far as Iran is concerned, I think was a wrong thing to say. It was said by the Israeli foreign minister. The silence, as I already mentioned, about the Iranian deal is, gives at least some people the impression that, and some people on the Hill say it openly. They say, why would we be fighting against the deal if the Israeli government decided? And this is something to always remember. I remember it as far as all kinds of other issues are concerned. And I remember it even during our attempts to explain to Americans how terrible the idea of the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the so-called disengagement, is. And some of them, including the top people, said, do you want us to be more Zionist than the Israelis? And this is something I don't have a good answer to. So we always have to keep in mind that it's not just about shouting and criticizing. It's about making the Israeli position very clear to enable numerous friends we have in Washington, both among Republicans and Democrats, to present the Israeli position further. So here, to sum it all up, we are not in any kind of crisis vis-a-vis the United States, but I think that this is not enough. We are not enemies with the United States. We are close friends, and we can't be satisfied with the fact that we don't fight each other and we don't quarrel. That's not enough.
Nevertheless, there has been, and I know you recognize this, as do all of the people on this call, that there's been a tremendous shift in the United States with respect to, especially even within the Congress, where it is no longer even, I don't want to say not frowned upon, but certainly people are feeling courageous enough to simply stand up and speak against Israel at a time when before that they had not. There is a tremendous shift in terms of the undercurrents as well that is allowing that to happen, not only in the United States, but around the world. And based on that, I have a question from Roland Sassoon, who is a President Club member of ours in South Africa. And he says the West, with respect to Russia, has found a way of applying sanctions on a scale never seen before. What are the prospects of these types of sanctions being used against Israel, if we understand that there's been a shift in attitude? And how could Israel deal with that, should it come about?
When, among other things, first of all, it's a very good question. We have a lot of debates here with other members of Knesset around this issue, not necessarily public debates, but we talk as friends. This is a big dilemma. There is no doubt that the precedent of sanctions against Russia could and would be picked up by all these BDS movements and all the bad guys. And yeah, some of them, unfortunately, I hate to say that, as they say, don't quote me on that, but some of them even members of Congress, in the United States, I mean. And I don't have any doubt that there will be attempts like that. And by the way, just to make quite clear that, I'm not driving any comparisons. It will not be because Israel will, God forbid, start purposely bombing hospitals or schools. It will be because of the construction in Shimon HaTzadik in Jerusalem or something of the kind that will be referred to as a war crime. So there's no doubt that it's something to deal with. But that's exactly that's exactly the role of the Israeli government, to see these things in advance, to get organized as far as these attempts are concerned, to start talking about it. By the way, it's not something that automatically works, but as we were talking about the possibility of Israel taking a stand on the issue, I think that it wouldn't be so unrealistic to suggest that Israel could explain to American administration, the European Union, that we could join the other countries in this position in case there is clear criteria for implementing sanctions of that kind. And as we know, Israel will never ever meet the criteria in terms of, like, bombing in other countries' capital on purpose, including, as we said, houses, schools, and you name it. Then it could be at least be a first step or an attempt to combat this kind of approach.
Steve?
For as long as I've been following what's happening in Israel, there has been much criticism of weak public relations, hasbara, by Israel in presenting its case to the world. It doesn't even seem to have a message. The Arabs have had a message. The Palestinians have had a message. Israel hasn't. If you had the ability, if you were in a position to change that, what would you do to improve Israel's public relations? And a sub question is it time to really explain to the world why creating a Palestinian state out of the land of Israel is something that is never going to be acceptable to the Jewish people in Israel?
Steve, you're asking the million-dollar question here. I think that first of all, there have been attempts to create one message for the state of Israel. I have difficulty to believe that it will be a game changer for a number of reasons. First of all, if we would have a sample of I wouldn't say of the world population. I'm not talking about some third world countries or North Korea or something of the kind. If we would have a sample of American population joining our Zoom right now, and then instead of me answering your questions, Adam would turn to all those who joined, and then we would ask them, what is Steve talking about? 90% of them wouldn't have first idea. What kind of Jewish land? What kind of Palestinian state? What is the difference between Judea and Samaria and the West Bank? What does PLO stand for? And so on and so forth. What is this whole story, Jerusalem being Israeli capital or being Palestinian capital? People just don't have first idea. And by the way, I'm not bad-mouthing them right now. If I would start asking this distinguished group of people about all the details of what happened in Rwanda, between the different tribes there, I'm not sure that all of us would have a straightforward answer, including myself, by the way. I think that if we're talking about Israeli hasbara, and we see these days how much, what a huge role interests play in this world, our hasbara should be about Israel really being very successful in different areas and bringing to the world all kinds of inventions and technology, medicine, you name it, in every field, being very advanced in all these fields, reducing the motivation of different countries that, as I've said, don't care that much about the conflict except for all the regular statements, reducing the danger of sanctions and reducing the Israel bashers to the professional BDS movement members that are not that numerous. Now, on a wider scale of things, unfortunately, as I said, I don't think that there is a deep understanding of what's going on here, of the conflict. So the understanding is that there are strong, well-equipped, organized guys named the Israelis, and there are the oppressed, poor, weak guys named the Palestinians. And the sympathy is always with the underdog. So you can't combat it in any hasbara way. And this is the perception. And you know what? Sometimes I say to myself, thank God that this is the situation. Yes, we are better equipped, we are better organized, we are much stronger. Just if you want a perfect nightmare, imagine for 1 second that it would be the other way around. So I think that we have to work on it constantly. I don't think we can find one message. And the Israeli position, one thing I would say, can't be in this field wishy-washy either. Because when you do the right thing, it turns out that you can be an optimist. If you're doing stupid things, I recall when I mentioned that I had the pleasure of addressing the Menachem Begin Security Conference a couple of days ago. So I mentioned a conversation with my colleague, many of you know this colleague, and I said, it was many years ago, I said, how come that with all these, Oslo agreements and Annapolis and Camp David and Annapolis and disengagement and all these attempts, I always tell you in advance why and how these things will fail, and you always stubbornly continue to believe in this nonsense. And that colleague said to me, yeah, it's not such a great idea to be a pessimist in the Middle East. You will always be right. And me, I'm not ready to succumb to pessimism. I'm always working on things, trying to reach the solutions and so on and so forth. And it turns out in the recent years that you don't have to be a pessimist in the Middle East. When you do the right thing, things really change. You just don't have to buy into all this nonsense of Oslo Accords or disengagement. Look at the recent history. Do you remember, you do remember, I don't have to ask you, you do remember how before the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, in every newspaper, on radio, every radio and TV channel, you could hear specialists, you could read or hear or see specialists saying that Jerusalem will be burning, Middle East will go berserk. The moment the American embassy establishes itself in Jerusalem, there will be a national uprising of the Palestinians and so on and so forth. No, it never happened. And the embassy is still there. Even more so. I hate to tell you that, but 2 years ago, 3 years ago, not 15 or 20 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in the most intimate security forums, in the locked rooms, with no, phones or computers around, in very honest discussions, I personally heard the top security experts, including heads of different security forces here in this country, who said loud and clear, never ever there will be an agreement with any Arab country, a real peace agreement, before we reach a comprehensive agreement with the Palestinians. So I guess the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain are not Arab countries, because now we have peace agreements with them without reaching comprehensive peace agreements with the Palestinians. So what I'm trying to say, Steve, Hasbara is very important, but without having a real platform that the majority of the Israelis agree on, and without a clear position of the government, we are confusing ourselves and the world. Shall we bring Israeli sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, to parts of it? Probably not. And if not, then probably we really are planning to give back Ma'ale Adumim and Gush Etzion, because if we're not planning to do that, why not bring sovereignty there? So I think that, as I've said, clarity of the Israeli position will already solve part of the problem. Yes, there will be Israel bashers. Yes, anti-Semitism is still there. Yes, there are different roots of anti-Semitism. Yes, as it's very unpopular to be an anti-Semite or to be called an anti-Semite, it's much easier to be anti-Israel. This is quite legit. But a clear Israeli position, at least as I've said, will reduce the numbers of these people.
So I want to switch gears once again with just the last few minutes that we have, because with respect to Israeli legislation and going back to the conflict in Ukraine. Mindy Stein, our President Club member in New Jersey, says that she was shocked that she just heard on another call that an Israeli law was passed that would cancel the visas for free entrance to Israel for Ukrainians. Are you familiar with that, and can you comment on that?
No. There was no law like that. There was no legislation like that. Nothing of the kind ever happened. On the contrary, there were even some. There was, once again, I hate to go back to this all the time. There was an ever-changing position of the government and the Interior Ministry in the last 3 weeks. Yes, we want the refugee. I mean, we're not talking about those who are eligible under the law of return. We're talking about Ukrainians, okay? So first they said no, then they said yes, then they said a quota, then they said this, then they said that. But now even there, it's a little bit easier for refugees. There's a quota of 25,000. It's a little bit easier for them to get here to this country. There was this stupid idea to take some kind of deposit from them, people running away from the war, and you take a deposit from them. So now it's a little bit easier for them. Having said all that, I don't think that Israel is in the position and has to accept 2 million refugees from the Ukraine. We are not a bordering country. We are not big enough. But I think that people who come here have a reason to come here. They have some of them. They are not eligible under the law of return. But such is life. They have relatives. They have friends, close friends here who are ready to accommodate them. So it's not something unheard of. I do have to say that I personally said to a friend of mine who wanted to, a non-Jew, Ukrainian, a former member of the Ukrainian parliament, whom we became very close to, I said to him that I understand that you decided to be a Rambo and you are fighting, but if you want to get your wife and daughter out, I will definitely accommodate them. I'll accept them here and whatever. They never came because his wife joined him in some kind of volunteer police forces or something like that, but it's quite normal.
Well, we were told that we have a hard stop with you as you have another call coming up, and we want to thank you at this moment for taking the time that you have for us. And as things do change health-wise, and they have changed, and the rules have changed, American Friends of Likud is planning on coming to Israel in June. We'll be here on our mission, our leadership mission, finally, first time since the end of 2019, June 12th to the 15th. And assuming that you will still be in town during that week, we would hope to have the opportunity to speak with you in person again.
Thank you, Adam. I just have one request. When people come here, please wear name tags because I won't recognize you guys up to 2 years. So
thank you very much, Yuli. Thank you very much, Steve, and everyone on the call. We appreciate it. We'll see you all next time. Everyone stay healthy, stay well, stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.